Y'all look on the overhead for me. Oh, first of all, before we get into that, you do have unit questions. These are coming from Chapter 14. Now, for those of y'all who have a book, Chapter 14 is not in the printed text. One thing that the publishers did to keep the cost down is they put Chapter 14 as a downloadable PDF. I'm giving you the PDF to Chapter 14 on Moodle. You can download it and use it from there. I also recorded a lecture of me doing it. Watch the video. All the questions come specifically from here. And this covers annual reports and brochure design, basically things that corporations use to show information to the public. We're going to do your own annual report, your own personal report. That's how we're pulling it in. If you go to the unit exercises, you'll need to download today's zip file. There it is, this zip file with the information that goes along with it. And here's the information that I'm giving you. First of all, I'm giving you a variety of spreadsheets. Which Microsoft Word document do we use for spreadsheets? Excel. So these are Excel spreadsheets that you can open up. Average temperature, Common Core assessments, and even tree heights. I'm also giving you some vector files that we'll use in creating different graphs and graphics with there. I think the first one that we're going to use, let's jump into Illustrator. I'll close these out and reset my things. When you make your new document, File and New, you're going to create 3 artboards. So change this to 3. The size of it needs to be letter. You can have it portrait or landscape. It doesn't really matter as long as it's 8.5 by 11. And you've got 3 artboards. And I'll just keep it, do 3 columns, and we'll say OK. So here's the 3 that I'm working with. You're going to be creating 3 different bar charts, bar graphs, 1 per page. So as I create these, I'm just going to zoom in on 1 page and work within this one. If I open up my data set, the first one is going to be a simple graph, and it's going to be the data set for the average temperatures. So I'll double click open. Hopefully everybody's got Excel on your computer. I believe we've loaded it up. And I'm giving you the data, the highs and lows throughout the year, I believe in London. High temperature and low temperature. Does everybody know how to read a graph? Okay, very good. Whew, I'll have to send y'all back to junior high. Okay, in Illustrator, if you want to create a bar graph, and remember a bar graph essentially looks like this. You've got data that goes across an area and it shows height, right? Well, Illustrator gives you a great tool to automatically create bar graphs. If you look at the bottom of your toolbox, if you click and hold, here's the different kinds of graphs Illustrator can create. Column graphs, stacked graphs, there's bar graph, lines, pie charts. We'll go through more of these later and I'll show you how to customize each one of them. Now, even though I'm calling this a bar graph, I want you to pay attention. In Illustrator, a bar graph is going left to right. The one I want you to use is the column graph to go from top to bottom. Make sense? It's the same data, it's just one's turned sideways, one's not. I'm going to use the column graph tool in all of these. So with this tool, you can either click and drag, or you can click once to give yourself an area. So if I click and drag, this will pop up. I'll undo that and show you again. If I click once, it'll give me a specific size that I can type in. Just like in any other Illustrator, if you want a specific size for something, we'll get it. All of our graphs are going to be 6 inches tall and 4.5 inches, 6 inches wide, 4.5 tall. We'll say OK to that. And this is what I get. I get a simple little bar graph, and also I get this area that I can type data into. And this is kind of like a little mini Excel spreadsheet. And whenever I type into here, it will automatically convert it to my live bar graph. So I'm going to type in just some basic data, 1, 2, we'll do 5, 3, and 9. Cool? Whenever I type data into here, first of all, if I need to change it, right here will transpose. So if I've accidentally typed it in a column and I want it in a row, that's what that does. All that does is change up left to right or up and down. If I want to commit to it, if I want to apply it, when I hit the checkbox right up here, this is what it looks like. So here's all my data. Set 1, 2, 5, 3, and 9. Pretty cool. It automatically generates the numbers for you, and we'll see later it automatically generates other information if I have more to it. Right now it's called a live graph, which means I can always go back to this data set and I can change up the numbers. If I didn't mean to type a 3, I meant to say 4. If I needed to add on another bit of information, 7, I can type it in from there. If I added another column, this is what it would look like. Let's see, I'm just going, oops, not too big of numbers. Just going to type in some random ones. 9 and 1. So I've got 2 columns. If I hit the checkbox, this is what it looks like. By default, it generates it in black and white, and then it will update the values based on what I need. Pretty cool? Very, very dull as well. Okay, so for the data that we're going to use, swap back and forth between Excel. All I'm going to do is highlight my data, click and drag, copy it, jump into Illustrator. We'll delete all of this away. Oh, I'm just going to highlight it and paste it. Copy and paste it in there. So check out what I've got. High and low, January through December, and all of my information. Watch what happens when I commit and apply to this. Boom. Automatically, I've got the highs. In this case, it's going in increments of 10. I've got all of my months down here at the bottom, and I've even got a little key off to the side showing me what's high and what's low numbers. Pretty cool? Very, very good. Now, of course, I see a couple of problems with it. Obviously, my text is running together, and what I want to do is I want to add some color to this. Let's jazz it up. So let me show you the first easy way of selecting and highlighting your information. Once you've got your information down, you can close this out. You don't have to keep it open. I'm going to move it back into place. So I can move it over to here, make sure it fits inside of my area. That looks good. If I need to bring back up my data information, first of all, I can click on my data, hold down Control and click on it, and this will bring up this little bit of information. There's type, data, and design. Later we'll get into column and markers. If I need to change the data type, what type of graph I'm using, when I choose type, this will bring up this information, and I can choose a different type of layout. It also gives me some other options, change up the value of my axes, my categories of my axes. We won't be changing these up, but we will change up, say, the column width. So if I needed to make these a little bit wider or smaller, I can change this up. So let's say if I made it 80, whoops, sorry about that. Made it 80, when I say OK, you can see they got a little bit more narrow. You can change up how things look. All that's Control, click, and choosing that. As far as data, if I need to change my data, this will bring back up my data box, and I can change up that data as well. Let's say I wanted to change the color on these. Now if I select it, it's going to select everything all together. Which tool do we usually use if we want to select in Illustrator one specific thing? White arrow tool. I'm going to add on to it. Underneath the white arrow tool, the direct selection tool, there's another one called the group selection tool. This will allow you to select groups of information, and this is specifically good for bar graphs. So group selection is white arrow with a little plus sign. With this one, if I click off, if I was to double click on any area, let's say the lows, double click, you see what happened to all the lows? They all were selected. They're all part of the same group. And so that was an easy way of changing that up. Now from here, all I've got to do is to change their fill or their stroke color. So if I want my lows to be a nice blue, pull up my color picker, change it to a blue. Hang on a second. I'm going to use my swatches. Let's make sure that works. There's my blue. Notice that I double clicked on that. That didn't work. Pull up your swatches and change up your swatch colors. Sorry about that. Let's do the same thing for the highs. So I'm going to double click on this one. Notice that all the highs are now selected. And I want to make those red. We'll choose a red. And now all the high has been changed up as well. Pretty cool? Okay, so there is that. There's the matter of the text down at the bottom. So let me zoom in. We'll edit this up. For the text, I like to use the direct selection tool, just the regular white tool. To select only it, we're just going to click and drag. Now you can see the blue line has selected those. And all I've got to do is change up the size of it. I think 9 points tends to be pretty good. Now I can see all of it. 9 points, it's small, but they're still running together. So one thing I'm going to ask you to do is to select every other month. June, August, October, and December. How did I select every other one? What did I have to hold down? Shift. Hold down Shift and select them. And I can just use my arrow keys and nudge those up and put them on a different line by themselves. Pretty cool? Very, very easy, simple stuff from there. Okay, so that's a boring, simple bar graph, and you know how to change the colors on it now. I do want you to add a title to this, and I say you can use any font or any style that you want, but give this a specific type of title. If you do need to move, say, the key around, I'm using my white arrow, highlighting those, and I can place those somewhere different. If I use my black arrow, it's going to select the whole thing. That's why we use direct selection. Okay, let's do the second one. Let's get a little bit more fancy with it. The second data set that we're going to do, come on, close it out, is going to be the Common Core assessment. How many of y'all know about Common Core? My wife's an English teacher. I have to hear about this all the time. So, this time we're going to be comparing the Mississippi average and the U.S. average on test scores. We're going to do the same thing. I'm just going to copy my information, highlight it, Command-C to copy it. Let's make a new bar graph. Here it is right here, still using the column type. I'm going to click once, type in my size, and now I've got my basic bar graph. Since I've copied it, all I've got to do is paste my information and hit the checkbox. And there's my bar graph already created. Pretty cool? Very, very good. So when you do your own information, type it out in an Excel spreadsheet. It works out really, really well for this one. So for this one, I want to not just change the color of it, I want to use a graphic. I want to show something a little bit better with it. In this case, I'm giving you the graphic of two different pencils. And I want one pencil to represent one set of data, and I want the other pencil, other color, to represent another set of data. And I've opened this up. I'm just going to copy these. So select them, copy. Let's paste them into the document we're working on. So here's my two little bit of pencils. What we need to do is to define this as a graphic that we can use. And so the first thing we're going to do is to select the one that we want to use. Let me make sure I do this correct. I'm going to select the red pencil first. The red pencil is going to represent Mississippi. Our test score is in Mississippi. So I've got it selected. With it selected, we're going to go up to Object. At the very bottom, go to Graph and choose, make sure I do it right, Design. This time, I can define this as a design to use inside of a graph. So with it selected, when we choose New Design, it'll by default call itself New Design. You can give it a new name, and this time we're going to call it Mississippi. Say OK. And we'll say OK to that. So now that's saved up. Do the same thing for this one. Select it, Object, Graph, Design. Make a new design out of it. Now we've got a yellow pencil, and we can rename it. In this case, we'll call it US Average. Say OK to that. Everybody with me? All cool? Now let's have fun. Let's apply this to my graph. So just as we've used the Group Selection tool to select one set of data, we're going to use the Group Selection tool, this one, to select and change the other set of data. The first one I think we're going to do is the Mississippi. I'm sorry, US averages. So I'm going to select US average, double click, got them all selected, US average. From here, we're going to go to Object, down to Graph, and in this case, we're going to change the column design. And this will bring up this. It's going to say, hey, how do you want to design your column? Well, in our case, we want to choose one of our new defined patterns. US average is what we're working with, so with US average selected, I get some different styles to choose from. Vertical scaled, I've also got uniform scale, repeating, and sliding. For this one, we're going to choose repeating. And I'll show you what it does. What it's going to do is every time, I want pencils stacked on top of each other. I want them to build on top. I want it to repeat as it goes up. And it's going to ask, how many units does it repeat? So if I was to look over here, how many units is this kind of going in? Sets of 50. So I'm going to let it repeat itself. One pencil will represent 50 units. And that's what we'll type in here. And we'll keep it as a scaled design. That's okay. When we say OK, this is what it looks like. I'll deselect it. Now I've got a pencil repeating itself, going up my graph. If it goes to the very top and it's like a fraction of 50, notice it scales down. Pretty cool? That's because it's scaled. I could have chosen it to chop off, but I'm going to keep it as scaled. There's a little pencil right there. And so now I can see pencils as part of it. Let's do the same thing for Mississippi. Use your group selection. Double click on the black. Got them all selected. Go to Object, Graph, and this time we're going to change the column. The Mississippi one's going to be red. And the type is going to be repeating. How many units does it need to repeat? 50. This time, if I wanted, I'll show you what chop design does. Instead of scaling it, we'll say OK. And now I get something that looks like this. Red pencils and yellow pencils side by side. And you can see what it means by chop. It chopped off the design right where it needed to be, rather than scaling it down. And so this is a great way of graphically representing two sets of data, right? You've got something else that represents, in this case, school. So you can put that into a bar chart. And it works out really, really cool. So that's one way of doing it. Let's try another one. And of course, I want you to fix the text down here, make it smaller, make it readable. I'll leave that up to you on how to do that. And you can move this over. Add a title to what you're doing. Make your graph look pretty. The final type that we can do, in this case, is going to be different tree heights. So, got a bunch of trees. Mr. Ivy's trying to plant a tree in his backyard. I'll copy that in here. We're going to use the same graph tool, column graph. We'll get into the other ones later. The size of it is going to be exactly the same. We'll say OK. And we're going to paste our data into there. Have I lost anybody on that part? That's the simplest part from here. When we say check, here we go. You can close out your data set. Don't need to change it up. We can move this into place. I've got the height of them, and I've got the different types down here. This time, I want to use a different graphic. Instead of a pencil, I'm giving you a tree EPS. I want to use this graphic to represent the height of different trees and comparing from there. So I'm going to select it, copy it, and paste it into my document. I've got to have it pasted into this document in order to work with it. We don't have to scale it or do anything else. We'll keep it just like this. Now I'm going to try something. I'm going to do the same thing that I did with my pencils, and we'll show you some of the other things you can do. But I've got to define this. We'll make a copy of that real quick. Define this as a graphic. So how do we do that? Object, graph. In this case, we want a new design. I've got it selected. We'll say new design, and we'll call this one tree stretched. You'll see why it's called S-T-R-E-T, stretched. This is just an example. I'm breaking away from the stuff, your exercises. So now I'll choose my group selection. Here's what it would look like if I selected my columns, went to graph, and changed up the column from here. In this case, let's choose the tree. Now we can vertically scale it or uniformly scale it. Here's what vertical scale looks like. When I say OK, you can see what it does. It stretches that same tree out. You know, it looks pretty good, but what's wrong with it as far as looks?
Squished.
Yeah, like the taller trees look too squished, and if they were smaller, they would look really distorted. I don't like the distorted. I don't really want to stack trees on top of each other. That probably wouldn't look good either. So let's try another one. Object, graph, column. We'll choose the tree again. In this case, rather than vertically stretched, we can keep it uniformly scaled. We'll say OK. Now check out what I got. What did it do to this data? Yeah, rather than stretching it out, it also stretched and widthened it, changed the width of it, not lengthened it. But it proportionally scaled everything from here. What's wrong with this data? It's overlapping. It's a little bit difficult to read, you know, what's this tree behind here or what's that over there. So there's one more thing that we can do. What I would like to do, I thought this would be really cool. What if I can just change the size of the trunk? What if I wanted the trunk to go the height of this and then have the little tree up at the top? Here's how we're going to do this. Let's see. So I'm going to define one more type. Grab your line tool. I need to tell it where I want to stretch it out. So I'm going to use a simple line to do this. And I'm going to set my fill and my stroke to none. That's very, very important that you got that. Line set to none. On here, I'm going to draw just a horizontal line right up under where the limbs are. Cool? All I've done is drawn a line. I've still got the line selected. I'm going to convert that to a guide. Still selected, here's how we're going to do it. Go to View, down to Guides, and choose Make Guide. And when I do that, here's what it looks like. See how it's not really a line, it's a pulled guide, but just doesn't go all the way across your document. That's very, very important. Once you define where the guideline is, now watch what happens when I select both of them. Got them both selected. Let's make sure I've got them selected. Nope, my guides are locked. Let's make sure my guides are unlocked. Yeah, uncheck locked guides. Here's why. So now when I select both of them, I've got my guides selected too. Very, very important. Now let's define it. Object, graph, design. In this case, we're going to make a new design. We're going to call this regular tree. Say okay to that. Say okay to that. So what's the difference between this tree and my other tree? It has the line. The line's going to mean a lot. Now let's define it. Grab my group selection, double click on that, object, graph, column. We're changing up the design of the column. In this case, we're going to choose regular tree, the one with the line, and we're going to choose sliding as my set amount. It's going to look at the tree, and anything that's underneath the line, it's going to slide that. It's going to stretch out only that small part. So when I say OK, I get something that looks a lot like that. Pretty cool? It only stretched out. The top of the tree, totally proportional. Everything else, not proportional. It's still a little bit skinny. Hey, how do I change up the width of my columns? What did we do on the first one?
Control click.
Control click on it. Choose type. And this down here will allow you to change the width of the column. So let's, I think I actually do 120. We'll do it a little bit bigger. 130. Now they're a little bit bigger. Now it starts to look really, really cool. Pretty cool? And you can do this for multiple sets of data. You're just doing something simple for this one right here. Once you're finished with each one of these, main thing to remember, clean up your text at the bottom. To do that, you're going to use your direct selection tool, change the size of it, change the position, and give each one of them a title. When you are finished, save this as an Illustrator document, upload it to Moodle from there. Any questions? Simple, simple?
Upload it as an Illustrator.
As an Illustrator file. As an Illustrator file. One last thing before I let y'all go. On the Moodle page, if you do finish up early, I'm giving you some links to some different websites that have great infographic examples. Also, visualizing.org is a great place to find sets of data. So if you want to make your own infographics from places like the World Health Organization or from Facebook or from Google, they'll give you these data sets and you can start playing around and making your own. There's also the Feltron reports that you can do from there. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to y'all and let y'all get started.